Hello friends, welcome to English Inquel channel. In this video, we are going to discuss a very important essay, a seminal work in literary criticism that was published in the year of 1880 and is written by Matthew Arnold. So, before exploring the main topic, let's know about the critic. So, introduction to Matthew Arnold. Matthew Arnold, otherwise known as father of modern literary criticism. Yes, he is known as father of modern literary criticism. He was an influential English poet and critic, right? During Victorian era जोटा कि आमर थिला 1837 रु 1901 से पीरियड टाकू आमर क्वीन विक्टोरिया को ना अनुसार से पीरियड टाकू नेमिंग करा जायछि तो से एरिया से एरार से टाइम रो गोटे पोएट क्रिटिक बा गोटे प्रोमिनेंट फिगर थिले तो चला देखिबा ही वाज वन ऑफ द मोस्ट prominent figures of Victorian era, known for his contribution to poetry, literary criticism and social thought. He was born in Laleham, England. Matthew Arnold was born into a English influential family. His father was Thomas Arnold, who was the principal of Rugby School. Thomas Arnold, he was a renowned educator and headmaster at Rugby School. So from his childhood, he got an opportunity to explore the world of literature to the world of education. So this intellectual environment shaped Arnold's outlook on life and literature. As a poet, Arnold is perhaps best known for his reflective and melancholic works such as Dover Beach, the scholar Gypsy and Thyrsis. So Dover Beach, it was a reflective poem which explores the themes of loss, faith and uncertainty. The second most important work by Matthew Arnold was the scholar Gypsy. This was a poem inspired by Oxford and its rural life, which explores themes like imagination and education, knowledge, etc. Third important, the most important seminal work on criticism was the study of poetry that we are going to discuss today. Okay, so his poetry often grapples with themes of disillusionment, the decline of faith, and the search for the meaning in a rapidly changing world. Okay, so Arnold's dual career as a poet and a critic gave him a unique perspective of the role of literature in society, because Arnold was not only a poet, also he was a critic. So what do you mean by critic? What do you mean by criticism? What do you mean by literary criticism? Literary criticism means it's the analysis, interpretation or evaluation of a literary work. For example, examining its theme, structure, literary device, its style and technique used by an author. So that is known as literary criticism. गोटे लिटरेरी वर्क को जेतेबेले आमे इभालुएट करूचे ताकू आमे एनालाइज करबा तार थीम कोन तार टोन कोन तार स्ट्रक्चर कोन रहउची की टेक्निक यूज करचंती ऑथर, दैट इज नोन एज लिटरेरी क्रिटिसिज्म. सो मैथ्यू आर्नोल्ड वाज ए prominent critic and author and poet of Victorian era. So today in this video we are going to discuss his study of poetry. So he was also a public intellectual concerned with the moral and intellectual development of society during a time of great social and political change in England. As a critic, Arnold promoted a high standard of literary criticism, emphasizing the importance of art in shaping the moral and intellectual development of individuals and society. से कौन कहते पोएट्री को गोटे हाई स्टैंडर्ड सहित तुलना करछंती. माने पोएट्री केमती हबा दरकार, नेचर ऑफ पोएट्री कोन हबा दरकार सेटा को एस्टिमेट करछंती, जोटा कि हम आज पढ़िबा को जाउची. ही बिलीव्ड दैट पोएट्री हैड द पावर टू एलिवेट ह्यूमैनिटी. Poetry has the potency, poetry has the power which can lift up, which can elevate humanity. माने मानविकता को, मानविकतार शीर्षता को जदि कि हमको पहुंचाई पारे, that is poetry. Because poetry is the mirror of society. It gives us reflection of human life. So poetry should be in a standard level, right? So what is the role of poet, what is the role of poetry in our society, and what type of poetry should be, সেই বিষয়ে ডিসকস করছেন in the study of poetry that could transcend time and place. One of his most influential work, the study of poetry, offers an in-depth exploration of how poetry should be evaluated. Poetryটা কেমতি evaluate হবা দরকার, কেমতি analyze হবা দরকার. He defines poetry as powerful tool because ସେ poetry को describe କରିଛନ୍ତି as a powerful tool for intellectual and emotional enrichment. ଖାଲି ଯେ intellectual ନୁହେଁ, that has also emotional enrichment and outlines various ways in which it can be evaluated. Arnold's essay is structured around the intrinsic and objective qualities of poetry, advocating for a deeper and more intellectual approach to his study. He distinguishes between the primary ways of estimating poetry. ସେ କହିଛନ୍ତି poetry ମାନେ ସେ କ'ଣ କହିଛନ୍ତି, poetry he believes that poetry high destiny ର ହବା ଦରକାର. ତାମାନେ କ'ଣ, that mankind will discover that we have to turn to poetry to interpret the for us. ତାମାନେ କ'ଣ ସେ କହୁଥିଲେ, poetry console us, poetry has that potential, poetry has that power. ସେ କହୁଥିଲେ କ'ଣ, poetry को स्ट्रिक्ट जजमेंट दरकार कहीं पोएट्री खाली जे आमर इंटेलेक्चुअल ग्रोथ बा डेवलपमेंट करता ता नुहे. पोएट्रीर से पावर रही जे कि समाजर भल मंद सुख दुख किंबा आमर गोटे मानवीय चेतना को जागृत करें पारे. तेणु पोएट्रीटा सेतेबेले माने आफिल करें ह्यूमैनकाइंड को जितेबाला से गोटे हाई स्टैंडर्ड हवा दरकार. केतेबेले हम दैट नीड स्ट्रिक्ट जजमेंट. तो से जजमेंटा को केमी आम कर माने से स्टैंडर्ड अच्छी कि स्टैंडर्ड नहीं केमती आम जापर. तीन मेथड यूज करते कि नॉर्मल गोटे रियल एस्टिमेट हुए, आ गोटे पर्सनल एस्टिमेट, आ गोटे हिस्टोरिकल एस्टिमेट. बुझेगा. तो रियल एस्टिमेट कौन बा इंट्रिंसिक इभालुएशन. स्क्रीनशॉट नहीं जाओ, मुझे तो बुझेबी बट यू टेक स्क्रीनशॉट. देख कौन कहली, रियल एस्टिमेट मु सिंपली बुझे दूसरी, तुम मैंने नोट्स पढ़दब. रियल एस्टिमेट मीन्स एक्यूरेट एप्रोक्सीमेशन, माने जहाँटा लिखाई से अनुसार जजमेंट करवा. फॉर एग्जांपल इट्स फॉर्म, कॉन्टेक्स्ट कौन अच्छी पोएम्र बा इमोशनल डेप्थ कौन अच्छी, आर ट्रूली मेरिट कौन अच्छी बा डिमेरिट कौन अच्छी, सेटा को आम एस्टिमेट करने को कहते रियल एस्टिमेट. देख मुझे जहाँटा कहली से इट फोकस ऑन इभालुएटिंग पोएट्री बेस्ड ऑन इट्स इंटरनल क्वालिटीज, इट्स इंटेलेक्चुअल डेप्थ, इट्स इमोशनल रेजोनेंस एंड इट्स एबिलिटी टू एक्सप्रेस यूनिवर्सल ट्रूथ. Arnold argues that great poetry goes beyond the superficial aspects of language and form. It must engage with profound human experience such as love, death, and nature. Such poems should offer wisdom, clarity, and moral lesson that transcends the immediate context in which they were written. This estimate values the universal over the particular and sees the truth merit of poetry in its ability to speak to readers across generation, offering timeless reflection on human existence. जहाँटा कहली ना सेटा केते यूनिवर्सल, तार कॉन्टेक्स्ट कौन रोची, लव रिलेटेड पोएम अच्छी बा नेचर उपर अच्छी बा मोर्टालिटी उपर अच्छी, तो से बेस रे ताकू जज करबा. रियली जहाँटा लिखा है एक्यूरेट एप्रोक्सीमेट करबा को कहती रियल इभालुएशन. पर्सनल एस्टिमेट कौन, पर्सनल एस्टिमेशन जदि कहबा एटा होची हमर इंडिविजुअल टेस्ट. इंडिविजुअल टेस्ट माने कौन, रीडर उपर डिपेंड करे. मते मोर्टालिटी पोएम भल लगे, तेणु मुझे जितेबाला गोटे मोर्टालिटी उपर पोएम लिखाई मुझे जजमेंट केमती करी, मु निज व्यू अनुसार करी. दैट इज पर्सनल एस्टिमेट. बट सेमती हवा दरकार नुहे, सेटा ठीक नुहे एक्चुअली. कौन पाई, द पर्सनल एस्टिमेट इनवॉल्व्स जजमेंट पोएट्री बेस्ड ऑन द इंडिविजुअल रीडर्स इमोशनल रेस्पॉन्स एंड पर्सनल टेस्ट. मो टेस्ट अकॉर्डिंगली मु पढ़ी, मुझे अनुसार जज करी. दैट मे बी डिफर फ्रॉम अनदर रीडर्स इफ वी एनालाइज ए पर्टिकुलर ए सिंगल पोएट्री by 5 group of people. It may differs from individuals. In each individuals they will give different notion, they will give different ideas. That's why it shouldn't be judged in individuals tastes. So this approach acknowledges that different readers may connect with a poem in different ways depending on their own experience and preferences. Arnold recognizes the importance of its subjective response but cautions against allowing it to be the sole standard of evaluating poetry. A reader's personal emotional connection to a poem doesn't always align with its true artistic value, which may be more deeply rooted in the universal truth it expresses. Such as personal judgment can sometimes be influenced by bias. କାହିଁକିନା ଆମେ ଯଦି पर्सनाली जज କରିବା ହୁଏତ ଏଇଟା biased ହେଇପାରେ ହଁ କି ନାହିଁ and emotion making it less reliable for determining the inherent worth of a poem ତେଣୁ poemର ବାସ୍ତବିକ worth ଯାହା ସେଇଟା ପାଏନି ଯଦି ମୋର ଜଜମେଣ୍ଟ ଭୁଲ ହେଲା ତାହେଲେ poemର ଯେଉଁ ୱେଟେଜଟା ସେଇଟା ଆଉ ରହିବ କି ସେଇଟା ଆଉ ରହିବନି ହିଷ୍ଟୋରିକାଲ ଏକ୍ସପେରିମେଣ୍ଟ କ'ଣ କମ୍ପାରେଟିଭ୍ ଇଭାଲୁଏସନ୍ ହିଷ୍ଟୋରିକାଲ ଏକ୍ସପେରିମେଣ୍ଟ ଶୁଣ ହିଷ୍ଟୋରିକାଲ ଏକ୍ସପେରିମେଣ୍ଟ ହେଉଛି poem in relation to the time period means କ'ଣ जो टाइम लिखा है से टाइम पीरियड कल्चरल एनवायरमेंट को लेकिन आम एस्टिमेट करवा यहाँ को भी ठीक नुहे सी गोटे मेथड अप्लाई करथिले दैट इज नोन एज टचस्टोन मेथड दैट वाज द बेस्ट पॉलिसी दैट मैथ्यू आर्नोल्ड हैज कॉइन्ड दिस मेथड और दिस इज ए टेक्निक व्हाट इज टचस्टोन मेथड you will analyze you will judgment whether a poetry is of standard level or not but how will you do so. This method involves comparing a poem with the works of established literary giants such as Homer, Shakespeare, Milton, Dante. Why? To determine whether it possesses the qualities of greatness or not. If a poem can stand up to the same level of intellectual depth, moral seriousness and universal insight that defines these works, then it can be considered a great poem in its own right. तामाने कौन आमे गोटे पोएट्री को कंसीडर करिबा हमरो क्लासिक वर्क सहित गोटे लव पोएम ने भी दैट आई विल कंसीडर इट टू सोनेट 18 बाय शेक्सपियर जदि सेथिरे जहाँ जहाँ थीम अच्छी ये से सब गुड़ाक लैक करुच्ची ताहेले दिस वर्क विल नॉट बी कंसीडर्ड एज ए स्टैंडर्ड लेवल पोएट तामाने आमे टचस्टोन कहले कौन बुझ देख टचस्टोन होची आमर जेतेबेले सुना बा सिल्वर को परखिबा पई गोटे स्टोन यूज हुए तो एठी आमे टचस्टोन कहले इट्स ए बेंचमार्क व्हाई फॉर क्वालिटी और टू examine the truth we compare the literary work to some classic poets like Milton, Chaucer, Shakespeare बुझिला जदि किसी लाकुना रहुची then it will not be considered as a standard level poet बुझिला so if a poem considered okay to touchstone define these works then it can be considered a great poem in its own right. The touchstone method provides an objective, reliable standard for judging poetry, helping to identify whether a poem is truly exceptional rather than simply a product of fleeting tastes of personal preference. Bujhala? The role of poetry in society. Arnold argues that poetry plays a critical role in shaping society. इंटेलेक्चुअली एंड मोराली जहाँटा कही पोएट्री आमको केवल इंटेलेक्चुअली नुहे मोराली भी आमको स्ट्रंग कर सोसाइटी को बदल थाए. ही बिलीव्स दैट ग्रेट पोएट्री हैज द पोटेंशियल टू गाइड इंडिविजुअल्स ऑफरिंग इनसाइट्स इनटू द ह्यूमन कंडीशन. इट नॉट ओनली स्ट्रेंथेन्स अस इंटेलेक्चुअली बट ऑल्सो इट offer insights into human condition and it also guides us. It also inspires reflections on life's most important question. Poetry in Arnold's view is not just entertainment but a tool for social and intellectual improvement. He suggests that poetry can provide spiritual nourishment and help to elevate individuals, pushing them to become more thoughtful and morally aware. खाली जे हमको एंटरटेन करे था एटा से नुहे बट इट एलिवेट्स आवर थॉट आमर भावना को उच्चभिलाषी करे था आम अंतर्चेतना को जागृत करे था आमको मोराली आहरी सचेतन करे था. So, as society faces challenges and changes, poetry serves as a stabilizing force, offering timeless wisdom that retains relevance throughout the ages. So, critique of contemporary poetry. Arnold is critical of the poetry of his time, which he feels often lacks the moral and intellectual depth of great works of earlier poets. He expressed concern that much contemporary poetry is shallow, focusing too much on personal emotion and transient themes rather than engaging with universal truth. He believes that the poetry of his era fails to meet his high standard set by poets like Milton and Homer. से कौन कहते तांको एरार माने विक्टोरियन एरार जो सब पोएट किए थिले रॉबर्ट ब्राउनिंग बैरेट आमर आल्फ्रेड लॉर्ड टेनिसन ए सब मानकर पोएट्रीटा स्टैंडर्ड लेवल नुहे लाइक मिल्टन एंड होमर बिकज दे रोट विथ ए सेंस ऑफ इंटेलेक्चुअल सीरियसनेस एंड ए कमिटमेंट टू मोराल रिफ्लेक्शन से माने पूर्व जमती मोराल रिफ्लेक्शन ऊपर लिखुतिले किंतु वर्तमान कंटेम्पररी राइटर्स माने दे आर एंगेजिंग with their personal thought. That's why Arnold didn't review the contemporary works as a standard level poetry or as a great poetry works like our classic ages. So Arnold calls for a return to the higher ideas of poetry, one that serves both individual and society in a meaningful way. So that's why he always criticized the poet and the authors, and he says that a poetry should be सर्व्ड फॉर बोथ द इंडिविजुअल एंड सोसाइटी तेणु पोएट्री जे खाली जे सोसाइटी हम ता नुहे कि खाली जे इंडिविजुअल हम ता नुहे इट शुड सर्व फॉर बोथ ऑफ देम इंडिविजुअल एज वेल एज इन society level. So in conclusion, Matthew Arnold's The Study of Poetry offers a thoughtful and multifaceted approach to understanding poetry. Arnold emphasizes that poetry should be judged not only by personal or subjective tastes but by its capacity to express universal truth, its contribution to literary tradition, and its intellectual and emotional depth. Through the real estimate, the poetry, through the real estimate, the personal estimate, and the historical estimate, Arnold provides framework for evaluating poetry that transcends individual bias and offers a way to assess a poem's true value. Ultimately, for Arnold, great poetry has the power to guide individuals, enrich society, and offer profound insights into the human experience. तार माने पोएट्री का काम कौन रहिला? It guides us or it guides individuals as well as it enrich society. Along with it also offer profound insights into the human experience. So I thought so it's all about the study of poetry. I think it will be helpful for your exam points, and if you found it helps in your study journey, so please never forget to give your feedbacks in the comment section and stay tuned. Have a good time. Bye bye.